Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and of course I'm here with Mike and Mike. And actually, Mike Connor, today I'm kind of going to call you out on something. I was I was on LinkedIn the other day, and I saw something come up for you about the Sales Enablement Society of Phoenix. Now, I don't know what that is, but sales enablement, I know my granny always told me not to enable people. So what's happening?
Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, I'm glad you caught that. It's actually quite timely because we're actually holding the kickoff meeting here for the Phoenix Scottsdale chapter tomorrow night. So you probably saw one of the mentions for that event, and I'm glad you saw it. So what is sales enablement? I think that's a great question that a lot of people are asking. In fact, a lot of people are joining the society because of that reason, because it isn't really well defined. And a lot of companies have created these roles out of necessity, but there's not a lot of definition around what sales enablement is or what that means if you find yourself in that role. And
so when you say that people don't know what it means and there's some confusion or there are multiple perspectives around sales enablement. One of the ones that I commonly hear is a role similar to sales ops, sales operations. Mike, are you seeing, as you guys have been putting together the chapter here in Phoenix, are you getting a lot of people from sales operations roles who are raising their hand to say they want to get involved, or is this less about sales ops and maybe more about something else?
Well, I think we're going to learn that tomorrow night. And based on the types of roles, and we've had about, 40-something people register and confirm for the meeting, which is actually a pretty nice turnout for an organically grown, hey, let's join this chapter kind of meeting. I'm pretty happy about that. And I think it sends a signal that says there are a lot of people interested in this topic, and maybe a lot of people haven't heard of what sales enablement looks like. So before I get into sales enablement as a topic, maybe I should give a shout out to the people that really founded this whole society. And basically, a gentleman by the name of Scott Santucci got together with somewhere around 15 or 16 sales leaders in the Washington, D.C. area. And they had some commonalities. They had some thinking that was evolving around really some operational challenges with sales. Most of the people that met had sales backgrounds. They decided to create an all-volunteer organization that was really dedicated to promoting and elevating sales enablement. Is really a strategic function. And sometimes you'll see things like the society or the position of sales enablement being mentioned as a business inside of a business. But anyhow, if you want to learn more about the Sales Enablement Society before we talk about what sales enablement is, you could certainly go to their website. It's SESociety.org. And just check out it's not a super complex website. It's pretty basic and gives you some ideas about how the society was formed and so on and so forth. So for anybody curious about the topic and you want to read about the society, then feel free to check that out. What really caught my eye was around the time period that they formed this organization. What jumped out at me in the email or whatever I saw, the post that I saw, when I saw the term sales enablement, it really brought back some memories. And Mike probably remembers because actually he's the one that thought of this as a title in our former company. Was we actually had created a role called Sales Enablement Director, and it was a name that I don't know if you remember how you came up with the name, or
I thought I made it up, but then
but there was some logic behind it.
Well, but then looking back, it looks like sales enablement's been around for a while. But really, what we were talking about was how this role could leverage knowledge inside an organization and relationships that have been created outside of the sales organization, pulling those relationships and knowledge together in a way that could help bridge that gap in communication between the sales team as professionals working with their customers, the product team inside the organization who is building product, the marketing team who is in the organization trying to build out content to support the sales organization, and the technology team who's working on the things that they were working on. So this person who moved into that role was really the perfect kind of hub who could connect using spokes out to each of those individual groups and represent the sales story across each of these teams, helping enable sales as a team to be more successful without taking a lot of time away from our reps who had to be working with customers. And many times when they were delivering the message back into the organization, didn't necessarily use the same language. And the story that I like to tell around that is I could have a fork in front of me and someone could describe it as a 4-pronged eating utensil. Someone could describe it as something you eat with. Somebody could describe it as a fork. We could all be talking about the same thing, but by using different language, we could confuse everyone. The person that we put into this role would help to bridge those gaps. So ultimately enabling the sales team.
That's where it evolved, or that's where it was sort of born with us. It's another one of those things where we started using that as a term really out of a necessity, because when I put the position together, obviously when you do things like that, the first thing you have to do so that your HR VP and whoever runs your HR department, I guess, they want a job description. They want to know, is it exempt, non-exempt? What are the responsibilities? What are the qualifications? Who are you going to put into this role? What's the value to the business? All those things. So I had to put together that package. And I remember my first draft of that, sending it over to HR. The feedback I received initially was, well, where does this fall? Is this a marketing job? Is this a sales ops? I mean, because we had all these departments sort of established. And what I wanted to do is break it out from each one of those established silos and say, no, it's actually an entity unto its own. Even though it's going to only be one person to start, we ended up adding 3 more people to that team. But it was different from traditional marketing. It was different from just an operations, providing tools kind of job. But it was really, like Mike had described, more comprehensive than just any one of those pieces. And really, we used to call our sales enablement director kind of our Swiss Army knife, because he could plug himself into these different groups, not only realizing what the needs were from the sales perspective, from the sales team's perspective, from hearing from our customers and the customer perspective. Basically, he was that piece of middleware that could really facilitate conversations to make sure that we were doing the right work, focused on the right things, and delivering the tools and the things that the organization needed.
And had the juice to get things done. When I talk about juice, that you're feeling not only by the people he's working with that he knows what he's talking about, or this person knew what he was talking about, but also by others inside the organization who didn't work directly with him, who knew that he had the experience and knew what he was talking about and could represent the sales organization well. A lot of times when you try to plug a marketing person in who maybe hasn't carried a bag, or you plug in a project management person in who has read a couple of books on sales, they have a hard time being able to communicate across the organization the practical application of the things that we're doing.
I liked your use of the term carried a bag, a marketing person who hasn't carried a bag. That's good. So in these answers that you've given so far, you've laid out some of the great things that came from having somebody specifically aligned for sales enablement. But I'm going to ask it straight out. If a company devotes somebody specifically to sales enablement, what kind of benefits can they expect?
Projects were actually completed within the scope of the requirements that we had originally set forth. Now, how many times have you given engineering a set of requirements and they are supposed to deliver a square, but they deliver a rectangle? Well, it has 4 sides to it. It has 4 corners that are 90-degree angles. Oh, I forgot to communicate that each side had to be the same size. Well, that was my intention. I knew that's what I wanted, but I didn't communicate it well. In this role, that person not only had the technical capability, the product capability, but also had worked with the sales team long enough to understand, what are customers looking for? Why are they looking for these things? They understood the context of the request that we were putting in. So we didn't waste a lot of time having to redo work, and didn't waste a lot of time having to have meetings after meetings after meetings. This is not a router and a switch kind of position. It's not I'm going to move these things through each of these lanes on my Trello board and get them to completion. I'm actually thinking through the process. I can see how the business application. I understand where it fits. So for me, when I think of sales enablement, I think of somebody who's in a role that may not necessarily be customer facing. They may never want to be customer facing, but they understand the customer personas well enough. They understand the customer needs well enough. They understand the needs of the sales team in general. And they are putting the tools, processes, things in place that will help that sales professional or that sales team be as effective as possible.
If you have a sales ops person that's a project manager and the sales VP has said, hey, I want you to implement this selling tool for my team by the third quarter, that person will then have a project plan. And what they'll do is they'll gather requirements, they'll present that to the developers or whoever's doing the implementation. And it's very much a cookie cutter process. And it's kind of one-sided too, because really what they're communicating to the developer, whoever's doing the technical work, is the requirements that the sales team or the customer has. And they don't really worry about what the needs are from the developer or from the technical expert. And so what the sales enablement person did, the first thing that I saw as a benefit from having this person in that role was he wasn't perceived as one of the sales team members. It wasn't a salesperson telling us what to do. He was a person that actually took the time to understand what the requirements were from both teams in both directions. He understood both of our worlds well enough where he could be that filter that in some cases could ask the right questions to speed things up so that we would get the information we need or that technical people would get the information they need. But it was a way to bring our groups together working on projects where what I saw dissipate was the us-them mentality. Oh, sales wants this thing. We've got to go build it. Well, we're building a lot of things, so sales will have to wait. I mean, a lot of that stuff kind of went away when we had a common goal with one person that understood the full project and from different perspectives, just made that work a lot smoother.
Mike Connor, I'm awfully glad I saw this come across on LinkedIn, that you were involved in this, because clearly it's important. And I never would have thought to ask about sales enablement if I hadn't seen your involvement in the Sales Enablement Society. You've given us a great overview of what it is, why it's important. Why do you feel so strongly about it that you're now even involved in sales enablement outside of Catalyst Sale?
Well, it's something that anything that's sales related, and if you talk about elevating the sales profession and really helping people that are just either getting into this as a profession or even our own teams and working with our clients, it's important to us too, because if there are best practices or things that we've learned along the way that we can share with others, we certainly want to do that. There's another reason too why I'm interested. I mean, we're located in Scottsdale, Arizona. When you think about Arizona as member of the tech community or of the startup community, I like to get involved in projects that sort of contribute to the overall success of Arizona. And so part of it is I really like the fact that this is a relevant topic that a lot of companies are struggling with, or that individuals might be struggling with. And if you can help anybody in that role, that's great. But I also like to be connected with people in my backyard here that I can get to know better. And if I can help them in their roles, then, and if I can learn from them too, then that works out really well.
Okay, here's my last question for you about sales enablement. If this is a new concept, because it is to me, perhaps it is for other people as well. If we want to introduce this into our organization and start this conversation, what would you say is the best way to approach that? How can we introduce this to somebody new or introduce this new idea into our own organization to begin talking about it?
I think one of the first things you have to look at inside your organization is what's working and what's not working. How connected are resources that fall outside of the direct sales team or indirect sales team or sales in general? How connected are they with the things that the sales organization needs? Do you feel like you're missing things? Do you feel like your sales team has to go out and create their own content? Do they have to create their own collateral? Do they have to create their own whatever? If you're in that environment where the sales team is spending a lot of time creating content or more time creating content than they are talking to customers, you may have some gaps inside your organization, and you may want to fill that with sales enablement. On the flip side, though, if things are really working well, you don't just have to add in a new role into the organization because it's the cool thing that's happening inside sales organizations. So I think we got to be careful, because too often things like this become the flavor of the month.
And there's a lot of that happening. I mean, we've talked about social selling as well. And so you'll find a lot of people have that in their titles now, where they're the director of social selling, or that's the emphasis that they're placing on their organization. Now you've got sales enablement. There's all kinds of things that pop up. And I think what's different about sales enablement is it's bigger than one role. It's bigger than a person that has some expertise in how to, make a better profile on LinkedIn and then start networking. This is something that solves problems that can be pretty diverse and that can be different from organization to organization. And I think it'll be very interesting when we have our kickoff meeting to get perspectives from people coming from different size companies with different challenges. I think if we learn quite a bit, we could kind of make this a recurring topic even on our own podcast as we experience the feedback and see what companies are really dealing with. Maybe we could have a follow-up after that kickoff meeting, kind of see where this goes. Right now, we're just basing on our forward-looking, we've gotten involved and we want to help contribute. But I think hearing more perspectives will be interesting. We'd be happy to provide that feedback to our audience here.
Thank you, Mike and Mike. This has been a great episode for me because I didn't know what sales enablement was. So this has been very educational for me. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast. If you want to find out more, visit us on catalystsale.com, or you can find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast.